They set me up, they let me go. And that's how they ruined themselves, leading to a split, jail time, and multiple expulsions. This is a lengthy tale, but if you stay with it to the finish, you'll discover how I was falsely accused and dismissed from my position, unintentionally triggering a series of events that resulted in a major staff shakeup, with various supervisors being dismissed or transferred to different locations, the head boss being ousted and facing a breakup, and one supervisor facing scrutiny from federal agents and eventually detained, plus several employees being removed from the country. Let's dive in. I previously held a job at a high-end eatery run by a big corporation that controls multiple dining chains. I was employed there for roughly 3.5 years prior to them ultimately terminating me, but I'll get to that shortly. First, let me describe my duties there. My responsibilities at that workplace involved a bit of various tasks. From the moment I began employment, I made it a point to absorb as much knowledge as I could. I was quite insistent with the bosses whenever I aimed to master a fresh area. I began as a waiter, but over time advanced into various sections and roles, such as takeout, greeting guests, mixing drinks, assisting behind the bar events, food service for groups, and drop-offs. My main objective during my tenure was to be accessible for the maximum number of shifts feasible. I earned around $12 per hour, although that varied when I served drinks or waited tables and received gratuities. In time, the leadership observed that I excelled most in one of the roles without tips. I performed so effectively that they tested me as an informal leader over the group handling takeout, group meals, and shipments, since those formed a single unit. I understood this would likely result in slightly fewer shifts as I'd focus on one area, so I bargained with the bosses to boost my wage by about $1.50. Given the extra duties I was assuming, they agreed to the raise. I wasn't aiming for the highest salary possible. I simply desired to cover my expenses and have some funds remaining for enjoyment. I resided in the heavily taxed metropolis of Chicago, located in the already burdensome state of Illinois, making it challenging to get by and retain cash for personal leisure. I'm someone who appreciates basic joys and can savor activities for extended durations, so minimal funds sufficed for contentment. A single video game might captivate me for many months, occasionally even years. I had a household animal that I'd relocated with to Chicago, adding to my costs. Soon after assuming this informal leadership role, I began dating someone, leading to more outings and expenditures on her. Thanks to my role and careful financial planning, I managed to handle all this. Finances weren't the problem, but the bosses experienced frequent changes, meaning new arrivals often lacked understanding of the unit's operations or the significance of work hours to the staff in these areas. Soon, it became known that our existing top boss was set to be removed and succeeded. The new top boss was reputed to be exceptional at enhancing eatery performance. We searched his name, and he appeared as the top result online. However, the listing wasn't a positive endorsement of his dedication or his flawless skill in optimizing restaurant operations. It was in fact a booking photo from a law enforcement document related to ongoing household violence. This becomes relevant soon. We'll refer to him as Harvey. Not long after Harvey arrived and began alterations, one of our top supervisors submitted her notice. She declined to collaborate with him and, like a prophet, warned us to anticipate abundant inappropriate advances, sexist remarks, and for him to eventually destroy the establishment. Shortly after her departure, our top boss started substituting our existing supervisors with selected individuals he'd collaborated with before. In the end, all except one supervisor were swapped out. That remaining one was the culinary overseer. We'll name him Frito. Frito had been present since my start date. He appeared adaptable as his principles and morals seemed to shift based on his superior. Truthfully, I somewhat admire his adaptability for survival, but ultimately view him as a flatterer and betrayer. Harvey didn't truly appoint a supervisor for our unit, so we operated with minimal direct monitoring, except considering me in that oversight role. We lacked constant interference regarding procedures. Our unit encountered occasional issues, but overall functioned efficiently. Without a dedicated supervisor, we frequently had to summon a boss via communication device for assistance on matters requiring managerial authorization. Frito would typically respond to these requests, as the kitchen was nearest to our area. Gradually, the fresh group of bosses began regarding Frito as the overseer of our unit too. Yet, the regular staff there continued to see me as their leader. This resulted in whenever Frito attempted modifications that would harm us, the group depended on me to lessen those problems or discuss with Frito to permit us to continue our effective methods. Across many months, Frito and I clashed repeatedly. He and I regularly debated the value of shifts to the employees in this unit. He believed we ought to rely on gratuities like waitstaff, but as most orders were for pickup, they arrived via delivery apps, and those apps don't provide tips. We had limited shipments daily, and the gratuities from those amounted to perhaps $10 at best. Dividing $10 among 4 people yields little. It demonstrated that Frito lacked understanding of the topic. Soon, we held a gathering with Harvey, Frito, and the entire staff of this unit. It was presented as an opportunity to express all complaints and issues about the proposed alterations without fear of consequences. So the employees did precisely that. They discussed how Frito was attempting to reduce shifts despite not being our true boss. When mentioned that they planned to bring in a supervisor, the group proposed I assume the role since I'd already been guiding them and managing smoothly for recent months. I was also the individual leadership consulted for shift planning, as I knew workers' availability based on education or home commitments. I noticed instantly upon the suggestion that Harvey and Frito decided right then to eliminate me. Though unspoken, I observed their exchanged glance and intuitively sensed my time there was limited and my position would be eliminated somehow. They offered numerous assurances about maintaining shifts. They stated they'd cease dismissing all except one early, leaving a single individual to tidy and shut down solo. Since this wasn't a minor unit and it was overwhelming for one while upholding cleanliness and regulations, they vowed that assigned shifts would be honored. We weren't being demanding, so we indicated that typically 3 or 4 are scheduled. They could release 2 ahead, but at least 2 must remain for proper closure. The commitment was given for always having 2 for closing. Yet, merely a week on, they resumed dismissing all but 1 early nightly. One evening they attempted it during my closing shift, after we'd returned from a huge group event with immense tidying required for one. When Frito entered and tried to release everyone but me, I confronted him about repeatedly violating the meeting pledge. He stared directly and instructed me to cease protesting, and if I persisted in addressing his broken commitments, he could readily replace me. I swiftly recognized this as a plot against my employment. He desired escalation, so I retreated and began tidying. I wound up remaining far beyond, incurring extra pay. I received a formal warning for that, as extra hours need boss approval. When I declined to acknowledge the warning, noting I'd attempted to inform Frito I couldn't complete a loan before shift end, I was permitted to depart without signing, but solely because the personnel rep present wasn't aligned with Harvey. Fast forward to my termination day. It's key to mention here that I consistently arrived an hour ahead. Living in Chicago, meals cost much, but at work we could consume unlimited complimentary soup and rolls. So I'd arrive early daily for some as a meal pre-shift. But that day, entering the cooking area for soup, a prep worker informed me of a prepared item canceled post-cooking, and Frito directed to offer it. He confirmed Frito had voided it, and it was complimentary for anyone. It was my preferred starter, so I gladly accepted the free item. Shortly after settling in my seat, both Harvey and Frito neared and inquired if I'd ordered that item. I explained the prep worker provided it as the voided one Frito approved. Frito appeared confused and claimed ignorance, so Harvey stated, "I believe you realize that's stealing. Proceed and complete the meal, then collect your items and depart. That's your final dining here." I attempted to clarify the prep worker gave it, but they ignored, so I suggested escorting them to verify with the worker. But upon returning to the area with them, he'd already left. I had to collect my belongings, bid farewells, and exit. Exiting, I informed my unit's afternoon staff what occurred precisely as it did. They were stunned and upset, but mainly sorrowful at my departure. I chose to visit the finance room en route out to collect any gratuities left for me that week to avoid losing that. Prior to going, instinct prompted me to activate phone recording, tucking it in my pocket with audio capturing. Though the footage was dark from the pocket, I obtained a somewhat unclear audio of Harvey and Frito's discussion through the door on the plan's success, and efforts to remove me post-meeting with my unit. I rapped on the door and they quieted before opening. They questioned my presence and I requested my gratuities. They assembled what was secured and provided it, despite my growing fury from overhearing. I opted against immediate confrontation, thinking perhaps a greater impact later. I extended handshakes to both, expressed gratitude for the work chance, and departed, ensuring to remove my phone and capture the establishment's exterior, displaying its title and emblem. In restaurant work, you learn to always protect yourself. It applies to many jobs, but intuition suggested I'd require this later. If accused of stealing, I wanted proof of innocence for future applications, which is precisely what arose and sparked the escalation. During the commute home, I dispatched messages and shared in local online communities stating I'd been terminated and sought employment urgently. Upon reaching my destination, I'd arranged an interview for that afternoon. I received an offer mere minutes in, but after details, it seemed unsuitable, so I declined. I met with several others and discovered one ideal, with substantial wage growth over prior and no client interactions. It involved reviewing for a transport firm. Yet in the discussion with this role's boss, he noted he'd contacted my former workplace and conversed with the top boss, Harvey. Harvey claimed I'd been dismissed for stealing, fortunately. The interviewing boss requested details and permitted me to retrieve my phone for the recording. I inquired if the audio matched the phone voice. It did. That verified for him it wasn't fabricated. He heard the two bosses admit to framing me and viewed to the conclusion showing the establishment's front, with emblem and title. The interviewing boss, whom I'll call Dean, employed me right away and requested the recording. I provided it. I believed that concluded it. Around 7 months on, after adapting well to this position, personnel distributed a greeting to new staff message, detailing recent additions, some details on them and their images. They issued these for each hiring batch. One, Thomas, was a past colleague from the eatery. We'd collaborated at the entry point, so I was pleased to see a familiar liked face joining. I located his workspace and greeted, inquiring his reason for leaving the eatery. He hadn't departed voluntarily. He'd been released due to the firm facing scrutiny. It began modestly. The overseeing corporation for the chain got an email with attached footage. My footage recorded from my pocket. That prompted the company to dispatch an internal reviewer. Thomas was amazed I hadn't known, as there were many contact attempts. Upon his mention, I accessed the outdated email from my initial application to the eatery. I had over 24 messages requesting discussion of my tenure and dismissal. I never responded. I simply no longer cared. I'd also switched my contact number, preventing phone outreach. Thomas proceeded, noting that before the company sent someone, Harvey and Frito addressed my unit and proposed minor wage boosts to fabricate a narrative to the reviewer about my incompetence and failure in responsibilities. The day the company reviewer arrived, a group from my former unit resigned immediately before the corporate lady, whom we'll call Audrey, and ensured to expose Harvey and Frito prior to exiting. First mark against them both. Second mark occurred days after Audrey presented Harvey and Frito the initiating recording. They rejected it strongly, but Harvey's tone was unmistakable. It's distinct. Moreover, the footage captured their voices and mine during the amicable handshake farewell, which they'd boasted to Audrey, believing it improved their image for cordial separation. This wasn't the true second mark. That arrived when separation was evidently needed. So Audrey relocated Frito to another eatery under the parent firm and briefly lowered Harvey to regular supervisor. This divided them. They'd been a tight villainous pair, but investigative stress apparently broke them. They turned against one another. On social media, via a visible entry on the firm profile. The entry was later removed, but Thomas described it thus. Frito appeared in the social media image on the eatery's profile. And Harvey posted a subtle jab about Frito's inappropriateness in the photo since relocation for wrongdoing. Frito noticed and retorted something like at least searching my name doesn't reveal me as the spouse abuser. To which Harvey replied, amusing from the man unfaithful to his spouse with Janet's sibling. Not her actual name. But Janet was the person they designated to formally lead my former unit after my dismissal. The informal leader. Frito countered by noting like you haven't pursued many servers. They all share tales of your attempts to sleep with them. The entry was erased, but not prior to Audrey viewing it. That became the official second mark. Third mark followed when Audrey began questioning the female servers and drink mixers, checking if any verified Harvey's advances. All interviewed individually, many shared comparable accounts. Each woman confirming Harvey's pursuit stated he'd proposed being their financial supporter for explicit images or post-closing encounters. Harvey was terminated. But that's not the gravest. Audrey wasn't merely a random corporate figure. She was the prior area overseer and had directly employed Harvey's spouse as top boss of another city eatery. So she contacted that eatery and informed Harvey's spouse of the server's revelations. We discovered subsequently they divorced over his infidelity attempts after she'd granted a second opportunity post-assault. I can't fathom why she offered another chance after such, but she withheld a third. Post-Harvey's dismissal, the prep worker who'd provided the food was questioned by Audrey. I don't know the trigger, but he revealed being an undocumented migrant. She held his records, showing state identification and social number. This puzzled her and she sought details. It emerged that Frito had links and ran a small underground operation creating false social cards and IDs for undocumented hires at lower pay. It persisted for at least 4 years. Obviously, this constitutes a serious crime. With the possible publicity crisis, she deemed it necessary to notify officials. Local law involved federal agents as evidence extended beyond local scope. Frito was detained and promptly revealed names of workers he'd supplied false documents to. I'm unsure if he disclosed everyone, but he mentioned about 14, and of those, at least half were expelled by Thomas's release. One was the prep worker who'd given me the food on dismissal day. Thomas elaborated that it originated from my termination, but I hadn't forwarded that recording to the company. I'd only shared it with Dean upon hiring. I questioned him, and he said he'd shared with his spouse, a legal expert. He wanted her opinion on potential lawsuit against my former employer as their actions were improper. But he recalled our initial talk, where I stated I'm not one to seek vast sums from a whole firm over 2 jerks' errors. But I'd noted it would be satisfying to witness their job loss. So his spouse forwarded it to the legal department at my old eatery's corporate base. My superior showed his wife, who sent it to my former job's top executives. They aimed merely to oust 2 villains for their deeds against me, but unraveled a chain so extensive it continued through harassment claims. Disclosures about bosses betraying spouses with relatives of those in power positions. A breakup, widespread releases during probes, personnel restructuring, federal probe into potential illicit trading of forged official papers, and at least 6 expulsions, likely up to 14. I don't know if this qualifies as extreme retaliation since I didn't seek it actively. But Thomas demonstrated that even without intent, it was certainly devastating, and the aftermath was enormous.